All right. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So today is a special Shabbat, Shabbat HaGadol. But I had a feeling that last Shabbat was going to be a little bit bigger, so I gave the sermon last Shabbat. Today, there's a tradition after Shul, or like in between on Shabbat HaGadol, to study the Haggadah and to prepare us for Pesach. And usually what we do is during Seudah Shlishit, we study the Haggadah. This year, we're going to be studying the Haggadah right after Shabbat, so we're going to do a little bit of study now. And the idea is I want to give you something to bring to your table, wherever you go, to share something. So I have some handouts I'm going to give out at the end. But first I want to ask a question. Is Passover a happy holiday or a sad holiday? You would say happy? All right. Yeah?
It's interesting because a friend of mine who's not Jewish called me yesterday and he thought it was a sad holiday.
He thought it was sad.
He was giving me,
Yeah. Why did he think it was a sad holiday?
I don't know. I just told him no. They tried to kill us.
Ah, got it. So this is a great transition to one of the most well-known anonymous quotes in our tradition. What is a Jewish holiday? They tried to kill us. We survived. Now let's eat. So there you go. That is like the quintessential thing. So we're going to look at that as far as how do we view the idea of suffering during Passover, because that is a big part of it, slavery. And I bring this up because this year is a little bit different than even last year. We're now over 500 days, I don't know how many days, 580 something of the hostages being held in Gaza. And one of the things about the modern world is that we move on very quickly from things, right? We're okay, so everyone's okay. But everyone's not okay. I heard this really incredible podcast. It was a Dan Sinor's podcast, Call Me Back, with Rachel Goldberg Pollin. Highly recommend it. And I'm going to sharing a little bit of what her recommendations for the Seder. But one of the things she mentioned is that even she lost her son, Rachel Goldberg Pollin. And the most painful thing about it is that she says that there are other people, and we know what is going on. We didn't know what was happening with her. Now we know what's happening with the hostages. And so that it makes it even more urgent for her. So I want to, even though she's, quote unquote, doesn't have a hostage, but she still fights for them. So I want to look at that through the lens of that. Yeah?
There was some rabbi who made a comment, I forgot which one, that the problem with that they became used to it.
They became used.
Just themselves. And
You talk about slavery.
Right.
Yeah.
That was the whole problem.
Yeah.
When they did that, then they understood, and then they made the exit.
Yeah. So it's about kind of a mindset. So we're going to look at the beginning of the Seder a little bit, but first let's look at what is matzah anyway. So this is in Deuteronomy 16:3. Lo tochal alav chametz. You are not to eat it with leaven. They're talking about the Passover sacrifice. Shivat yamim tochal alav matzot lechem oni. Ki b'chipazon yatzata me'eretz Mitzrayim laman tiskor et yom tzeitecha me'eretz Mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. It's a very important line because it's quoted in the Haggadah as well, but it says you are not to eat with leaven. 7 days you are not to eat it with matzot, lechem oni. Okay, so it says lechem matzot, lechem oni. For with trepidation, or some say, you could say in a fast, in a hurried way, you went out from the land of Egypt. And then the line that isn't translated said, why are we doing this? In order so that you should remember the day of the exodus from Egypt for all the days of your life individually. So the question is, what does lechem oni mean here? So a common translation is bread of affliction or poor man's bread. The Midrash opens up a little bit. That's a second source. What is lechem oni? How do we translate it? Lechem shemaskir et haoni, et haoni shenit anu b'mitzrayim. Bread that brings to mind the affliction that they suffered in Egypt. So they're using that word oni, and they're saying that is what the bread is. What does it do? What is its purpose? Remind us of what we went through, the suffering. So it's interesting if we say Passover is a happy holiday, and we had someone who's not Jewish and saying, wish you comfort during this time as you think about the slaves. I will never forget, we were on a cruise for our honeymoon. It was a long time ago. And we went to Egypt, one of the places. And you know how you know the Jews? How do you find the Jews on a cruise? They go to the Friday night. Yeah, the Friday night service. So we're sitting there, and this guy at the end, he says, I'm a rabbinical student at the time, and he says, and we didn't have enough for Kaddish, and he says, can we say Kaddish? And I said, well, we don't have 10. And he said, well, I'm going to say it anyway. I said, well, what are you saying Kaddish for? He says, for the slaves who died here in Egypt. And I never kind of thought about that. Like this way of like looking back on it and saying, we're still remembering the slaves who were killed, thousands of years ago. We still carry it with us. It was just a lesson to me. So now we're going to go to this idea of what is Lechem Oni in the Haggadah. So, who knows that halach ma'anya di achalu abatana, right? So this is the word halach ma'anya is the Lechem Oni. It's in Aramaic. This is Lechem Oni, lachma onya, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are hungry come and eat. Let all who are in need come and share the Pesach meal. This year, we are still here. Next year, in the land of Israel. This year, we are still slaves. Next year, free people. So in the context of this, in the Seder, what is Lechem Oni? How do you define that term?
It says what they ate in Egypt.
What they ate in Egypt?
There was this suffering that they went through, even the food.
Yeah.
Now, when you make a party, like at a catering hall, the caterer brings out a cake that's 12 feet tall.
Yeah.
And then the bride cuts the cake and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But this is the complete antithesis. Could you imagine how long this caterer would last?
Yeah. So Rabbi Ehrlich points out this interesting point. You have this great celebration, and instead of a big cake, we bring out matzah. And you say, well, what are we doing here? If we're why are we doing this? Let all who are hungry come and eat, and we're giving them matzah. All right? So it seems to me like, what is this? Is it a bread of affliction, or is it something else? Now, we're going to go to a commentary. This is by Dr. David Arno. Lechem Oni. The Hebrew equivalent of the Aramaic lachma anya is Lechem Oni, which we read in Deuteronomy 16:3. Because here Oni lacks the letter Vav. It is usually spelled Oni, meaning its meaning is ambiguous. A fact not lost on the sages. Shmuel, who is a 3rd century, which we just read, said the Torah designates matzah as the bread of Oni because it is a bread over which we recite Onim, many words. That is, we retell the story of the Exodus. Rabbi Akiva reads Lechem Oni as Lechem Ani, not the bread of affliction, but the bread of poverty. His reading links matzah directly to the Haggadah's invitation to the hungry. So we're looking at the context of it, and the commentary, what does it kind of teach us about what is Lechem Oni here? So it could be a spiritual hunger. We live in a time, it's very interesting. When I was growing up, my parents used to always tell us about the small Seders they had. Why? Because they didn't have many family. Our parents are survivors. They had no family. And that was what their parents told them. Like, we used to have these big Seders. And what's interesting in America is that a lot of people don't have big Seders. We have small Seders. And what's interesting is we live a very individualistic life here in America. Not as communal as in other places that we lived. And that kind of keeps us away from bringing others in. They may have money, but they need something else. They're empty of something else, that they need something. Also, what is it? It's meant this is according to Shmuel, it's meant to recite many words. Meaning, we're supposed to like chew on the matzah, and it takes a lot of time to digest and chew, not like bread, right? And what does that do? It gives us time to talk about the Exodus. Okay, so the next one is, I need someone's sheet here because I don't have, I just need to borrow a sheet. The next one is getting back to this idea of Lechem Oni, a bread of affliction. And there's a beautiful passage in the Talmud, Brachot 5a, that I wanted to read. And it has to deal with, how do Jews deal with suffering? So the Gemara relates that Rabbi Elazar, another, the things in the bolded are actually what's written in the Talmud, and what's not bolded is kind of like commentaries that fill it in a little bit. So the Gemara relates that Rabbi Elazar, another of Rabbi Yochanan's students, fell ill. Rabbi Yochanan entered to visit him and saw that he was lying in a dark room. Rabbi Yochanan exposed his arm, and light radiated from his flesh, filling the house. He saw that Rabbi Elazar was crying and said to him, "Why are you crying?" Thinking that his crying was over the suffering that he endured throughout his life. Rabbi Yochanan attempted to comfort him. "If you are weeping because you did not study as much Torah as you would have liked, we learned one who brings a substantial sacrifice and one who brings a meager sacrifice have equal merit, as long as he directs his heart towards heaven." So he says, if you're upset at the end of life, you didn't learn enough, you didn't do enough, it's okay. You did enough. We have it proven here. Don't worry. And then he says, if you're weeping for lack of sustenance and are unable to earn a livelihood, as Rabbi Elazar was, indeed quite poor, not every person merits to eat off two tables, one of wealth and one of Torah. So you don't need to bemoan the fact that you are not wealthy. Again, he says, if you're suffering over kind of like thinking about you didn't become a rich man, don't worry about it. It's okay. Not everyone was meant to be rich. You ate off the table of Torah. That's good enough. Maybe even better. He says, if you're crying over the children who have died, this is the bone of my 10th son. And suffering of that kind afflicts great people, and they are afflictions of love. So this is a tough one, because he says, if you're crying over children, I've lost 10 children, and this is and he carried it with him, the bone of his 10th son. That was a well-known thing that Rabbi Yochanan did. Meanwhile, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Is your suffering dear to you?" Rabbi Elazar said to him, "I welcome neither this suffering nor its reward." Upon hearing this, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Give me your hand." Rabbi Elazar gave him his hand, and Rabbi Yochanan stood up and restored him to health. So this is a beautiful passage here. It deals with the really emotions, how we deal with suffering in our tradition. One of the ideas in Brachot, it's in 5b, but it talks about Yesurin shel Ahava, that the afflictions you have are afflictions out of love. It's a really tough thing to tell someone, but it's this idea of like God, you're suffering because God loves you. Rabbi Elazar, though, says, what does he say to that answer? I welcome neither the suffering nor its reward. He says, you know what? You can take your reward. I'm good. I'd rather not have suffered. And then how do we solve the problem here at the end? What is the message here? He gives us his hand, and he stands up and restores him to health. So what is kind of the role that Rabbi Yochanan plays here at the end?
Suffering makes you whole, I guess.
So he's saying that all these things, he's saying, all those explanations didn't work. All the theology of it, it didn't work. Whenever you speak, as a rabbi, I get this, when someone, a tragic loss, they say, why did this happen? And I can give 3 different explanations why. And I stopped doing that. I stopped it a long time ago. Why? Because no explanation is good enough. At that moment of suffering, what does a person need? Give me your hand. Comfort. A physical thing. Comfort. And so this is the beauty of the Pesach Seder. It brings together kind of the joy that people are feeling, the people who are free, then you have people who are still enslaved. People are suffering. They're enslaved by suffering. How do we bring them back? You can't fully bring someone back from it, but you can hold their hand and bring them back to a certain degree. And the question is it all going to be better? We learn, "Ve'chtov ala luchot ha'devarim asher hayu ala luchot harishonim asher shibarta v'samtem ba'aron." In Deuteronomy, we read, "And I will write on the second tablets with that which is written on the first tablets that you broke, and you shall place them in the ark." So the idea is, and the Midrash says, what was placed in the ark, both the whole tablets and the broken tablets. This teaches us in Bava Batra that both the whole and tablets were placed in the ark. So the idea is, even the ark, the Aron, held suffering and brokenness within it. And so it's a tough thing as we think about our Seders this year. How much do we talk about what's going on in Israel? Doesn't everyone just want to be happy? Can't we just focus on good things? And Pesach is this beautiful ritual, the Seder, that tells us actually life is not all roses and, petals and, rainbows. Life is that, and it's also about suffering. There's a beautiful article published a number of years ago by David Brooks. He says, "What suffering does." And he says, suffering gives people a more accurate sense of their own limitations, what they can control and what they cannot control. When people are thrust down into these deeper zones, they are forced to confront the fact that they can't determine what goes on there. Try as they might, they can't tell themselves to stop feeling pain or to stop missing the one who has died or gone. And even when tranquility begins to come back, or in those moments when grief eases, it is not clear where the relief comes from. The healing process, too, feels as though it's part of some natural divine process beyond individual control. And then he says, recovering from suffering is not like recovering from a disease. Many people don't come out healed. They come out different. They crash through the logic of individual utility and behave paradoxically. Instead of recoiling from the sorts of loving commitments that almost always involve suffering, they throw themselves more deeply into them. Even while experiencing the worst and most lacerating consequences, some people double down on vulnerability. They hurl themselves deeper and gratefully into their art, loved ones, and commitments. The suffering involved in their task becomes a fearful gift and very different than that equal and other gift, happiness conventionally defined. So we see here how we all feel. Who here has suffered in their life? Raise your hand. Suffered loss, close loss. So you all know. We all know how suffering works. And it comes back. It's good. You're doing well, and then you're not. And it's back and forth. But I have found what's helped me the most has been the people that I surround myself with, the people at the table. And that is really what Pesach is about. So I'm wishing you all a Zissin Pesach.